Hi everyone, welcome to the Sleep History Channel, the king who never lost a single war prologue. The shadow of the unbeaten throne in the forgotten pages of ancient history, there was once a kingdom so feared that even its name was spoken in whispers. The Kingdom of Valtherion. It was not the largest kingdom, it was not the richest, but it was ruled by a man whose name became legend across continents. King Alaric Draven, the king who never lost a single war. Historians debated him. Some called him a genius, some called him a monster, others believed he was blessed by gods who had abandoned the rest of the world. But one truth remained unchallenged. In 47 years of war, King Alaric Draven never lost a single battle, not one. Alaric was not born into glory. He was born during the winter siege of Valtherion, when enemy forces surrounded the capital and burned villages into ash. On the night of his birth, the sky was red. The air smelled like smoke and iron. His mother, Queen Elindra, gave birth inside a collapsing fortress, while arrows struck the stone walls like rain. The midwife whispered, "Your child is born into death itself." But Elindra replied softly, "Then he will learn how to survive anything." Moments later, she died. The newborn prince was placed in the arms of a dying kingdom, and outside the fortress gates, war continued. Chapter 2. The orphan prince, Alaric's father, King Varian Draven, fell. Only 3 days later in battle, Valtherion had no king, no queen, no heir strong enough to defend it. The enemy generals believed the kingdom would collapse within weeks. But something strange happened. The baby prince survived. Raised not in a palace but inside the Iron Monastery, Alaric grew among soldiers, monks, and war survivors. His childhood was not filled with toys, but with swords made of wood. At age 5, while other children learned songs, Alaric learned battlefield formations. At age 7, he memorized maps of 12 kingdoms. At age 10, he defeated a trained soldier in a mock duel. The monastery master, old General Harrow, once said, "That boy doesn't think like a child. He thinks like a war waiting to happen." When Alaric turned 14, Valtherion was attacked again. The southern warlords believed the kingdom was still weak after the royal collapse. They marched with 20,000 soldiers expecting an easy victory. Inside Valtherion stood only 6,000 defenders. The council begged for retreat, but Alaric, now a tall teenager with cold silver eyes, stepped forward. He said only one sentence, "We do not retreat in our own history." The generals hesitated. He had never officially commanded an army, but something about him made silence fall. That night, he became commander. The war took place near the Black River Valley, a narrow pass surrounded by cliffs. The enemy expected to crush Valtherion in open combat, but Alaric did not fight in open fields. He waited. He studied wind direction, river flow, enemy supply routes. Then, on the third night, he struck. He ordered his soldiers to dam part of the river upstream. When the enemy camp slept, the water was released. A wall of black water crashed through the valley. Thousands of soldiers were swept away before they even lifted their weapons. Those who survived ran into narrow cliffs, where Valtherion archers waited in silence. By sunrise, the battlefield was silent, not because there was peace, but because there was no enemy left standing. For the first time, the kingdom heard a new name whispered, the boy who commands water and death. After the victory, the kingdom no longer saw Alaric as a prince. They saw him as something else. Weapon-wearing human skin. At age 16, he was crowned king, not in celebration, but in desperation. The throne room was half burned from old wars. The nobles were afraid to look into his eyes. The crown was placed on his head. It was too heavy for his age, but he did not flinch. That day, King Alaric made a declaration that would define his reign. Valtherion will never start unnecessary wars. But every war forced upon us will end with our victory. No applause followed, only silence, because everyone understood. This was not a boy becoming king. This was a war becoming a ruler. Chapter 6. The First Great Empire War begins at age 8. The Zarvian Empire, the strongest military force in the continent, declared war on Valtharion. They sent envoys with demands: surrender the throne, pay tribute for 100 years, dissolve the army. King Alaric listened quietly. Then he asked, "How many kings have you defeated before me?" The envoy smiled. 32 kingdoms have fallen to Zarvia." Alaric nodded slowly. Then he said, "Then you have never fought me." The envoy left laughing. 2 months later, 80,000 Zarvian soldiers crossed the border. This was no longer a border conflict. It was the beginning of a continental war. The Zarvian Empire was not just powerful, it was built on conquest. Entire kingdoms had collapsed under its iron legions. Its generals were taught from childhood that fear was a weapon and mercy was weakness. So when 80,000 Zarvian soldiers marched toward Valtharion, the world expected a massacre. Even Valtharion's own nobles whispered in fear, "This time, even the king cannot win." But King Alaric Draven stood on the balcony of his war chamber watching the dark horizon. He did not look afraid. He looked calm, almost disappointed. General Harrow asked him quietly, "Your Majesty, shall we prepare for defense?" Alaric replied, "No, we prepare for correction." Chapter 8. The Strategy of Silence. Unlike other kings, Alaric did not rush into battle. He studied everything: Zarvian supply chains, weather patterns, soldier rotation cycles, even the psychology of their generals. Then he made a decision that shocked his entire council. He would not defend the capital. Instead, he ordered 6,000 elite soldiers to abandon the outer forts. Nobles panicked. "Are you surrendering territory?" Alaric answered, "I am not giving land. I am giving them confidence." And that was the moment no one understood his mind, because Alaric Draven never fought armies directly. He fought their thinking. Chapter 9. The Trap Called Empty Victory. The Zarvian army advanced quickly. They expected resistance at every border. But instead, they found silence. Empty forts, burned supply stations, abandoned watchtowers. Their generals believed Valtharion was collapsing from fear. One Zarvian commander laughed, "They are running before the war even begins." That belief became their downfall, because confidence makes soldiers careless, and careless soldiers forget to look behind them. Chapter 10. The Night of Broken Lines. On the 11th night of invasion, Zarvian forces camped across the Velkor plains. They spread widely, too widely. Their formation was loose. Their guards relaxed. Their scouts half asleep. That night, the sky was unusually dark. No moon, no wind, just silence. At midnight, a signal. Fire lit on the far hill, then another, until the entire horizon blinked like a living code. The Zarvian general frowned. "What is that?" A scout whispered, "Movement." But it was too late, because Valtharion's army was already inside their formation, not charging, not shouting, just appearing, from forests, from riverbanks, from abandoned tunnels the Zarvians never noticed. It was not a battle. It was an encirclement, forming in real time. Chapter 11. The king enters the battlefield for the first time in his life. King Alaric Draven personally stepped onto the battlefield. No golden armor, no royal banner, only a dark cloak and a steel blade. His soldiers did not cheer. They simply moved aside. Because when he walked forward, it was not as a king, it was as a conclusion. A Zarvian officer saw him and shouted, "Kill the king!" 5 soldiers rushed him. What happened next became legend. Alaric did not fight like a hero. He fought like mathematics. Every movement was precise. Every strike removed one threat. No wasted motion, no rage, no hesitation. Within seconds, all 5 were down. The battlefield did not roar. It froze, because they understood something terrifying. This man did not fight wars. He solved them. Chapter 12. Collapse of the Empire Army. Once Alaric's forces fully closed the encirclement, panic spread through the Zarvian ranks. Commanders shouted orders that no one could hear. Soldiers ran without direction. Cavalry crashed into their own infantry lines. And then Valtharian archers began their silent execution from the hills. No dramatic speeches, no heroic last stands, just systematic breakdown. The Zarvian army, once proud, once unstoppable, began to fall apart from within. By dawn, 80,000 soldiers were reduced to scattered survivors fleeing into darkness. The Velkor plains were no longer a battlefield. They were a graveyard of arrogance. Chapter 13. The first defeat of an empire. The Zarvian Empire had never lost a full-scale invasion, until now. News.
Spread across continents like wildfire. Zarvia has been broken.
And at the center of that sentence stood one name, King Alaric Draven. The Emperor of Zarvia reportedly shattered his war table upon hearing the report, not because of the loss of soldiers, but because of something worse. We did not lose to a stronger army. We lost to someone who understood war better than we understand life. Chapter 14. The King Who Does Not Celebrate. When victory reports arrived at Valtharion, the entire capital expected celebration, but King Alaric did not smile. He did not hold a feast. He did not raise a toast. Instead, he said, "This war was necessary, not impressive." His generals were confused. One asked, "Your Majesty, we defeated the Zarvian Empire's invasion force. Shouldn't this be celebrated?" Alaric turned away from the window. His voice was quiet. Victory is not celebration. It is responsibility. And in that moment, people began to realize something strange. Alaric did not enjoy war. He understood it too well to enjoy it. Chapter 15. A new kind of fear after the defeat. Something changed in the continent. Kings no longer spoke of conquering Valtharion. They spoke of avoiding it. Entire alliances formed, not to invade Alaric, but to prevent him from ever turning his attention outward, because a terrifying idea spread among rulers. If he can destroy the strongest empire without losing, what happens if he ever decides to expand? After the fall of the Zarvian invasion force, Valtharion entered a strange era. There were no invading armies at the borders, no burning villages, no urgent war horns. For the first time in years, there was peace. But King Alaric Draven did not trust peace. He once said, "Peace is never a condition. It is only a pause between two unknown intentions." And he was right, because somewhere inside his own kingdom, something was already moving. Chapter 17. The Council of Broken Loyalty. Inside the royal capital, a group of nobles gathered in secrecy. They were not common traitors. They were the highest-ranked advisors of the kingdom, men who had served under Alaric since childhood. But fear changes loyalty faster than gold. One of them spoke in a trembling voice. "If he continues like this, he will not stop at defense. He will become an emperor," another replied. "And when he becomes emperor, we will all become servants under a king we cannot predict." Silence followed. Then the worst words in any kingdom were spoken. "We must control him, or remove him." Chapter 18. The shadow plan. The betrayal was not impulsive. It was calculated. Step 1. Cut communication between the king and frontier generals. Step 2. Spread false reports of rebellion in the east. Step 3. Isolate the king inside the capital. Step 4. Open the gates for a peace delegation from unknown foreign powers. But their true plan was simpler. Kill King Alaric Draven inside his own palace. They believed even the greatest warrior cannot fight an invisible enemy within his own walls. They were wrong. Chapter 19. The king who already knew on. The night before the betrayal began, General Harrow rushed into the throne chamber. "My king, There are movements inside the council. I believe Alaric raised his hand. Stop. Harrow froze. Alaric stood by the window, watching the capital lights flicker. Then he said something chillingly calm. I know. Harrow's eyes widened. You. No? Then why not arrest them? Alaric replied. Because I need to see how far they are willing to fall. That was not anger. That was strategy. Chapter 20. The False Peace Delegation. 3 days later, foreign envoys arrived at Valtharian's capital. They wore diplomatic robes. They carried sealed letters of peace negotiation. But hidden beneath, their robes were blades coated in slow poison. They were not diplomats. They were executioners disguised as peace. The palace opened its gates. The council smiled, and King Alaric invited them into the throne hall. Chapter 21. The moment the trap closed inside. The grand hall. The atmosphere was quiet. Too quiet. The envoys approached. The council members stood behind the throne. Everything was in position. One signal, one strike, and the king would fall. The lead envoy stepped forward. King Alaric Draven. We come in peace. Alaric looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, No. You come in obedience to people who think I do not see them. A silence dropped instantly. The council members froze. The envoy's smile disappeared. Because in that moment, they realized he knew everything. Chapter 22. The palace becomes a battlefield. Alaric slowly rose from his throne, not rushed, not shocked, calm. Then he spoke. Close the doors. The heavy iron gates of the throne hall slammed shut, not by guards, but by hidden mechanisms already prepared long before that day. The council turned pale. One of them shouted, Traitor! You are trapping us too. Alaric replied, No, I am simply ending the situation you created. And then the soldiers entered. But they were not palace guards. They were Alaric's secret inner circle, hidden for years inside the capital itself. The betrayal had already been reversed before it began. Chapter 23. The truth about the king's mind. The leaders of the betrayal were arrested instantly. Some tried to fight, some begged, some shouted that they were acting for the good of the kingdom. Alaric listened silently. Then he said, The most dangerous enemy is not the one who hates you. It is the one who thinks they understand what is best for you. He walked past them without emotion, because to him, this was not personal. It was structural correction. Chapter 24. The Aftermath of Betrayal. That night, executions were not ordered. Instead, exile was chosen for most conspirators, only the highest. Traitors were imprisoned. This shocked even his generals. Your Majesty, they tried to kill you. Why spare them? Alaric answered, A kingdom that kills every flaw becomes a kingdom that cannot fix itself. And for the first time, even his enemies understood something. He was not just a war king. He was a system builder, a ruler who saw kingdoms like machines and fixed broken parts without breaking the entire system. Chapter 25. The Growing Fear Beyond. Borders outside Valtharian. The news of internal betrayal and its silent collapse spread quickly. Foreign kings were shocked. Not because there was betrayal, but because it failed completely. One emperor wrote in his private journal, We cannot defeat him externally. We cannot defeat him internally. Then what remains? The answer no one wanted to accept was simple. Nothing.